Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Crypto Q&A Live. I have with me Leigh Cuen, who is a writer for CoinDesk, a writer of a great many topics before she became a writer for CoinDesk. So thank you to everyone who is in the chat box right now, who is watching live. I appreciate you taking your time to watch this chat. Hopefully you have some questions, some input so that we can have an interactive dialogue. We have the super chat enabled on this channel. So if you feel like you would like to support this channel or maybe be sure that your question is addressed, you can always leave a tip with a super chat. Also, if you prefer to leave a tip in the form of Bitcoin, you can find that code on the CryptoCast YouTube channel homepage. So, hi Leigh, welcome to CryptoCast Network.
Thanks for having me today.
For sure. So today being the 10th year anniversary of the Bitcoin Genesis block, happy birthday, Bitcoin. I feel like I say that a lot for the white paper, for everything. I wanted to speak a little bit about something that is probably going to be, I think, more prevalent in the media regarding cryptocurrencies, and that is this new generation of people getting into Bitcoin. People whose parents have probably, hopefully, been exposed to cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin and are imparting their knowledge onto their kids. And I would love to get your thoughts on how you think Gen Z or this next generation of people will embrace or react with this whole cryptocurrency lifestyle and how they'll be using it or abusing it. What do you think?
Yeah. I've been very privileged to interview a lot of very young people who are interested in the space. And also, even before I started covering crypto, I used to interview young people, youth, teenagers, all the time, like literally on a weekly basis. And I'm really excited to say that they're very excited about the technology, not necessarily for profits or value, but for the potential it gives them personally. And that's really fun to see. I think that in terms of Gen Z, some of the values that they have is wanting to own their own data. They've grown up watching their older brothers and sisters get disillusioned with Facebook. They've grown up watching a lot of the data leakage that we've seen on the internet, and they really want to be able to hold and control their own data and also to hold and control their own assets and tools and even toys, in-game assets, that kind of thing. So I think that the values of Gen Z are very much in line with the ethos of cryptocurrency. And I also think that the commercial norms that they're used to, immediate, mobile, international, all of these things are also very much in line with the potential that Bitcoin offers consumers.
For sure. And also thinking about okay, so like my generation, at least, and I'm sure the generations after are faced with this issue of like, if they go to college, coming out of that and realizing that everything that they have majored in or graduated with that degree is very saturated. So trying to find ways around that and trying to find ways to earn money, and a way that blockchain tech or the cryptocurrencies has allowed people to make passive income with things like Steemit or library, like you said, owning your data and not selling that for the advertisers, but turning that around and earning a profit. I think that's really interesting for, I think that would be a huge market for things like this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's the famous Mark Twain quote that goes something like, "I never let my schooling get in the way of my education." So as I've been interviewing young people who are interested in this space, something that I found really fascinating is the way that they like taking control of their own education, learning aspects of cryptocurrency, whether that be the network aspects, whether that be the economic aspects that are interesting to them, and being able to dive deeper with all these open source resources, especially in an economy where there are less and less jobs where you're going to rely on for the rest of your life to take care of you. You're going to always need to be nimble in your career. I think that self-education aspect of the community really appeals to them. And I'm really excited to see when we have a generation that's raised with this as like their first thought and as like a norm, what it is that they'll create.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have that wall set up of something like you're trying to change how people see things, if they're brought up already understanding that, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Hopefully we can live to see that day. So for those watching or for you guys in the live chat interacting, if you have a question, please, before you write it, do question in all caps so it'll catch my eye and I'll be sure to address it. Also, if you are excited about this, if you're going to share it with your friends, don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. So that being said, I'm going to dive into some other questions so we can get to know Leigh a little bit better. So you do have a very diverse background in journalism. You've written about a lot of different interesting topics. I'm curious, describe kind of your journey from that into writing about cryptocurrencies and kind of what inspired you to be a writer for a platform like CoinDesk.
Yeah, so I first heard about Bitcoin in 2015 when I was writing about dark net markets as a sex and culture reporter. I started hearing the word tokens a lot around 2016 when I was at some foreign conferences. And it wasn't until 2017 that I took the deep dive and started focusing primarily on blockchain projects and cryptocurrency as my beat. I joined CoinDesk. And I think one of the things that really inspired me to come here is that there are editors here who know the technology better than most other editors in the entire media industry. I could probably count on one hand the editors that I would trust that know the technology enough for a reporter who's learning more about the technology and really wanting to dig deeper. And being able to work with editors who have been in this space and who understand how the technology works allows me to really go deeper and wider with my stories.
So do you find that you're working with a lot of writers who have a background in either developing or writing code for this tech, or like who are some of these other people that do the same kind of type of job that you do?
So the only reporters I know that have a background in programming are actually the tech reporters here. So Alyssa and Rachel both have a programming background before they came to media. Most other reporters that I know of that cover the space came from journalism or came from finance into the space. So that means that a lot of us are dealing with a pretty steep learning curve when it comes to networking. But for everyone, there's a lot of arguments of, oh, well, if you don't know everything about networking, you're not qualified to write about this space. I promise there's a lot of things that go on in media production that also you need to go to journalism school to learn, you know, how to identify bias, how to identify ethical treatment of sources. So there's a lot of things that we get to teach the people that come from tech and finance, and a lot of things that the people from tech and finance get to teach us.
So again, I spoke a little bit about how your past of writing of different topics. How does your experience compare to writing for cryptocurrencies, or what have you learned from your past that you can apply to help you out writing for this kind of topic?
Yeah, I felt like I had to completely learn how to do my job when I started writing about cryptocurrency, because you need to fact check in a very different way. You need to interact with your sources in a very different way. It's a very small world here in crypto. There's a select group of people that have a lot of access to the companies and the data that you would need to do good reporting. And I think most importantly, it's very difficult to separate opinion from bias in this space because there are no third-party objective sources. So I used to report on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is equally highly contentious. There's a lot of, you know, Twitter dialogue and fights back and forth. And so I'm used to that kind of passion. But there, at least, you know, we have the United Nations and you have Amnesty International. You have other third-party sources you can go to when you have, okay, both sides are on an extreme, like where do I find the middle? There isn't really anything like that in cryptocurrency. Everyone has their own reasons that they came to the space. And so it's really important that you diversify your sources so that you can learn about markets and also software and also the politics of Silicon Valley. And you need to interview all of these sources at the same time and then try and find some kind of middle ground where they overlap and where do they differ, what are their motives, so you can try and get the least biased perspective on the same issue.
Yeah, that's a lot of work, trying to like read between the lines of every kind of information. So it's, I mean, I keep thinking of people who are coming into this space brand new, and they run into like a YouTuber that they like or an article or something, and they kind of are like magnetized to that opinion. How hard, or I guess, so like, how do you avoid spreading like misinformation, or like, what do you do to like fact check? Do you like interview up? Like, I'm just curious about like how you can pinpoint what is an accurate kind of article to post, or, you know, how do you make sure you're being unbiased?
I mean, it's really hard, right? And it's very subjective depending on what the topic is that you're covering. When it comes to a software project, like for example, I never want to publish that something is faster and more efficient than Bitcoin if it hasn't been tested at the same level, because we all know that something will look different in theory on paper than it will actually work in the real world. It doesn't mean that there aren't projects that could be faster than Bitcoin or that might be faster than Bitcoin, but you need to look at, okay, are we comparing apples to apples here? And you want to look at open source records that might be comparable to other operating software projects. You also want to look at different kind of financial or legal records that would be comparable to other kind of companies in the space. We need to stop thinking about crypto as like, oh, well, this is great for a crypto project, and start thinking about it like, how does this perform compared to the real world and in the real world? So the best thing you can do in fact checking these kinds of sources is to try and find like, where is it a tangible noun and verb that I can hold? And then how do I assess that compared to predecessors in technology?
Yeah, so you're kind of taking people, well, and rightfully so, out of the utopian dream and like in the real world, how Bitcoin can actually be applied, or these different, I mean, we were seeing that whole generation of the ICOs last year. All they were white papers, right? They look great on paper, but do they actually, you know?
ICOs that did actually help fund the companies to produce real products. I could probably count them on one hand. So it's not to say that the idea of an ICO is bad, but definitely if somebody sends you a white paper and they don't have the funding, the infrastructure or anything like that, it's always important to be questioning and skeptical about promises.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a few questions in the chat box. I want to make sure that I address those. So first one, when will people stop valuing Bitcoin exclusively in the fiat value only? Perhaps that will come in the next generation. What do you think?
I think when people stop having to cash out. I mean, the only reason you value it in dollars is because you need to put dollars to get in and put dollars to get out.
Yeah, so when the retailers start accepting it, I guess. Next question. Oh, I love this one. As ladies, do you find it annoying that you get asked about gender disparity in crypto and Bitcoin?
Yes!
Of course.
Because of course, we're noticing that there are less women with power in this industry, right? Congratulations. Welcome to the world. There are less women with a lot of money and a lot of education and a lot of power in any industry that you're talking about. I've actually found much less sexism in crypto than other beats I've reported on, including politics, for example.
Do you think the ability for people to be anonymous in this space attributes to that, or like kind of using... Like, what do you think?
This is tricky, right? Because in some ways it empowers people to abuse others in ways they would not if it was credited to their face and their name. On the other hand, being anonymous gives some people the power to do some good and to make decisions that they would have been afraid to otherwise make if everyone could associate it with them. I'm not pro or against being anonymous, but I definitely do think it plays into the dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of people who think like there are 0 women in this space, and that's not true either. Like there's plenty of I know Cointelegraph has like a co-founder who's a woman. The founder of Trezor is a woman. Like they exist for sure.
Lots and lots and lots of us exist, as a matter of fact.
So next question, can you elaborate more on fact checking? Do you have some sort of process? Seems like there are many kind of claims, some which aren't even verifiable. So do you even, if it can't be verified, do you write about it?
So it's really on a case-by-case basis. And I'm very, very lucky that the team that I work with gives me the time and space to do that research. I want to really have a shout out to all the journalists that are in mainstream media that have to do daily production. It's extremely difficult to fact check this stuff, and it takes a lot of time. So I feel really hard. I feel for the people that have very tight deadlines and are doing the best they can. You just kind of have to evaluate it on a case by case. Like if something is entirely unverifiable, is the person who's giving it to you in power to know that information? Like for example, something on the back end, internal in the company that is not public information and would be very difficult to prove otherwise. I might publish something like that in a quote, very clearly attributing that it's something he's claimed. I don't say whether it's true or not. I might decide to omit it altogether. It just really depends on whether that piece of information is crucial to the reader understanding the entire article. If it's not, then I'd rather omit it. If it's important for them to be able to comprehend the article, then I might include it as a quote. If I can't do either of those, then I'm not including it, for sure not.
So you do write a lot very, very frequently. Is there something that you generally find you find yourself to be very passionate about to write in this crypto space? What draws your attention? What makes you feel like your article is worth writing, you know?
Yeah, I really like writing about people. So I want to write about a technology that's having an impact on real people, or people that are creating something that's maybe different than what other people are doing. I'm really fascinated by the idea of power structures and how they can be subverted or played with in ways that are less exploitive. So anything that plays into either of those aspects, you know, helping people, adding real tangible value for real people, or groups of people that are playing with power structures in a way that's supportive or different. These are the things that are really fascinating to me.
What is okay, let me go before I go crazy. Let me see what other questions I have ready for you. Okay, maybe, I don't know, I'm sure if you touch on this already, but looking back to when you were first exposed to cryptocurrency, again, you were talking about writing for like the sex industry online and these mentions of tokens. What was your first impressions of cryptocurrency?
So my first impressions from Bitcoin when I learned about it in 2015, this is really embarrassing. I don't think I've ever said this to people. But my first impression was I ran home and I started writing in my journal different creative things, just because I was fascinated by the idea. I loved this. I was like, this is such a wild idea that is so impractical given our current power structure. Could it change some power structures? I loved the idea that there was real potential here for something that didn't already exist.
Yeah, I think that's very similar to a lot of people who kind of get it right off the bat. They're instantly kind of inspired to different ways that this could be potentially applied because it's so new. Yeah, you don't have these already impressions of things to have thrown at you. It's just whatever you can make of it, kind of. Okay.
We have more questions.
That was my question. Not yet in the chat group. You guys, if you have more questions, those are great that we had so far. Keep them coming. Invite your friends over to here so they can watch have their questions asked as well. Like this channel, like this video right now if you're appreciating this discussion. I think it's really great. I'm pretty excited to be talking to Leigh. I
think we just got a new question.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Proof of keys. Do you believe it's actually made an impact on the newcomers that only know that exchanges is the place to buy cryptocurrency?
I don't believe there are many newcomers who only know that, only think that exchanges are the only place to use or buy cryptocurrency, that if they continue to use it, won't go deeper. What I've experienced when I've been talking with, for example, a lot of sex workers who started out using an exchange account basically as a wallet, is that one gets turned off or the other, and then it starts to be word of mouth, a whisper network of, by the way, guys, we need to be using wallets. Here's what these are. I think that people who find real value in the technology very quickly start to ask questions about how it's useful for them and what it is they should be doing in order to protect their assets. And I think that definitely, I know a lot of people who started only using an exchange that have since moved on to using all different kinds of nodes and hardware wallets. And I think it's the gateway drug. I think exchanges are just a gateway drug.
Yeah. Yeah. Who do you think Proof of Keys was really aimed for? Was it the newcomers, or is it kind of a wake-up call for people who have been, maybe they got in on the, well, maybe, who do you think the Proof of Keys was aimed for? Is it people who are new to this, or those who are just kind of lazy about them having on the exchange and kind of getting that wake-up call?
I think all of us are, okay, I'll make an exception. There are lots of people in crypto who are really technical, but I think a lot of us get lazy eventually when it comes to certain aspects of our finances, or when was the last time that you went through and made sure your computer was completely cleaned and that everything was organized. I think it's good to have regular reminders that we should be in charge of our own digital assets and making sure that our finances are healthy. I think it's not just for newbies, it's for everyone. Have a monthly checkup.
I know a lot of people were kind of criticizing this whole idea because this space is kind of fragile right now. And if a big exchange, I know hit BTC, there's a whole lot of rumors going on about that one. I'm not trying to fuel that, but if enough people did partake in this, which I don't think happened because there hasn't been any huge news yet, but heaven for, or, if it did expose some kind of fraud or vulnerabilities in an exchange, if that exchange were to crash, what that would do to the price of Bitcoin, to the faith of cryptocurrencies, because a lot of these exchanges hacks, that is wrongly reflected on the actual security of the coins themselves instead of just the exchanges. So what do you think about this whole idea of proof of keys? Do you think it was a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that reminding people to have good practices for their own personal keys is always a good thing. I think that I'm not going to speculate about what the market will or wouldn't do given any certain news that's really unpredictable. But I will say that the entire point of Bitcoin and technologies like it, censorship resistance, is to remove a central point of failure. So I don't disagree that there's probably a lot of legal risk and technical risk going on in a lot of exchanges. And I do not concern myself with it too much. It's maybe not my favorite thing, but I don't concern myself with it in terms of long-term for Bitcoin for me, because I am not a trader and that's not the value that I see in this asset. My ability to transact with Bitcoin directly person to person is not impacted by another business having bad security. So yes, it could cause bad press, and it could even cause, that would cause prices to drop, but whether the price of Bitcoin is a penny or 20 grand, if I have somebody else that wants to accept the Bitcoin from me and I want to accept Bitcoin from them, I'm not really impacted by the questionable business practices of other people who are not at point of failure in my life.
Exactly, and almost good riddance, right? If they were to fail, it's for a good reason. So
I really hope that the exchanges all continue to onboard more people into the space. I want them to conduct their business in an ethical way and continue to flourish in bringing new people accessible ways to get Bitcoin. Because without them, it is very difficult for an average person to get Bitcoin. But I do not live or die based on their company successes.
Yeah. Can you imagine if the future of Bitcoin depended on word of mouth and actually making transactions person to person? I wonder what that would look like.
I mean, you don't have to. You can buy a ticket to Tehran and see what that looks like. Like, there are places in the world where really, I'm not going to say there's not exchanges, and I'm not going to say that, they're cut off from the world, but there are definitely communities where word of mouth is the way that Bitcoin and information about Bitcoin spreads. And I think that we can learn a lot from those communities. And it's important to learn about that because we do not want the new institutions that have arisen in this industry to become points of failure in themselves. That's the entire reason that we're leaving the banks.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so another question.
Questions now.
Yeah, this is great. They're pumping them out. Good job, guys. What's your take on neutrality versus qualifying subjectivity of the journalist? And relatedly, what about the incentives in journalism, i.e. advertising revenue model, not just in crypto?
Yeah, so I've been pretty widely known to say that I believe the current media distribution industry is broken, and it serves the bottom line of Google and Facebook and Twitter and the other companies that really handle the distribution of content, not the reader themselves. And this creates this very broken, very toxic incentive model for the content creators. And I think it's really important to remember that news is a business. We will create what people will consume. So beyond the systematic issues, on an individual level, readers actually have a lot more power to influence coverage than they understand. When you see something that's helpful content, content that is uplifting, content that promotes the kind of narrative you want to see, share it, and not just things that are hilariously scammy, because hilariously scammies are lots of fun, but we don't want to incentivize media companies to produce more of that content, because nobody cares whether you gave it a hate share or a share because you liked it. They cared about the share. When it comes to subjectivity, something that I really learned reporting specifically in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is that there is no such thing as complete objectivity. Everyone has a motive, everyone has a point of view, everyone has their own biases. And so I think as a journalist, the best thing you can do is to be very honest with yourself about both your own biases and the motives and biases of your sources. And you need, that's when I was talking about having different translators, whether that's for code or whether that's, for legal compliance, it's also very important to understand your different sources' motives so that you can not fall into a trap of thinking that any one person is a single point of failure in your reporting. Is completely, it doesn't have to be a deliberate lie. It doesn't have to be that they're trying to manipulate information. They might overlook an important piece of information because of a personal bias. So there's no such thing as objectivity completely. And the best thing that you can do is just be really honest with yourself about all the different potholes and dangers and conflicts of interest, and then do your best to go in the middle between them.
Yeah, and that's true also. Yeah, that was great. Also, like as a consumer of information like that, it's good to keep that in mind also, knowing that it's not necessarily a completely, as much as they would have liked it to be, a completely objective thing. And I think skepticism generally is good to have whenever you're ingesting information. Yeah.
Got it. I'm going to add one more point on that. We have a tendency, or a lot of people, I think, have a tendency to think that criticism is a sign of distrust, or that criticism is a sign of wanting to disavow an opinion. And I'm personally of the belief that the most love that you can have for a person or a topic or a technology like Bitcoin is to look dead in the face at its flaws and to criticize it with respect and to criticize it with the intention of being constructive. It's always, always, always welcome to criticize a reporter's work as long as you're doing so politely and respectfully, because that's the only way that things can get better. And it's the same true as of a perspective. If there's a lot of articles that are touting the same line, then criticizing them constructively and with love and respect is the best thing that you can do. It's a sign of affection, not a sign of hate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also really good to do for those who are able to like analyze the code of different cryptocurrencies, to do so to find the holes so that they can repair it and make it all the more stronger. Just because you found a flaw doesn't mean the whole thing is a failure. It means it has a chance to repair that flaw and become better for it. So yeah, for sure. Don't take anything too personal as long as it's done respectfully. So another question from the chat box. What's your elevator pitch on what Bitcoin is?
So I do this a lot. Anytime I get into like a shared Lyft or Uber with other women, and they ask me like what I do for a living, and then Bitcoin comes up, I always tell them that it's kind of like Venmo, but it can't be taken away from you. It's money that you can send to an institution or to a person, but that you're physically sending it and they're physically receiving it. And there's no one in between that's a credit card processor or a payment processor or any of those other people. It's just money. That's what it is.
Yeah, well, there it is. Okay, well, until we get another couple questions in the chat box, let me see what other ones I have. Oh, okay. So speaking of criticisms, what do you think of crypto Twitter? Is it a useful tool? Has it become toxic? Do you ever find crypto Twitter as a source of information for you? What do you think of crypto Twitter?
I love crypto Twitter. Crypto Twitter is a jam, and I'm extremely, extremely grateful for the way that it's allowed me to interact and engage with people all over the world who are much more knowledgeable than me on many topics, and some who are less, and I've been able to help them. I love crypto Twitter, and I think it's a huge resource for anyone who is entering the space and looking to learn.
Okay, so I'm okay. So what are some things that you wish would get more exposure? What are some things that you think have been overplayed, talked too much about? What do you think needs to be balanced in regarding to media exposure for cryptocurrencies and their projects?
I wish that more people talked about how people are using Bitcoin instead of focusing on the macroeconomics of it in terms of the market. The market is very important, and taking that perspective is very important. But when you do it to the exclusion of what that asset actually can do, we forget that, I mean, Bitcoin only has a price because we're assuming that people use it, and people do. And I think a lot of the personal stories, the way that it's impacted their lives as they're using this new tool that was never accessible to them before, is one of my favorite things about this space. And I wish that more people gave credit to these users and really listened to their personal stories and learned from them. Like, how can we create this as a better tool, knowing how people use it?
Perhaps maybe too, as time goes on, and again, I'm going to bring in Gen Z, how you mentioned that they're not so much into crypto for the price speculation, but more for the actual usability. So maybe the media will be trying to cater more to what, you know, what they would be interested in consuming that information.
May that be. I will get
that. Well, by that time, you'll be a veteran, so that would be great. Okay, another question. With proof of keys, what is the risk for individual users? For example, loss, human error, etc.
Okay, so I'll confess something to you right now. I am a one-woman black hole for keys. If there's a way to mess up key management, I will find that, and I will do it not once but twice. So, I mean, there are lots of individual risks. There's a lot of human errors. There's a lot. I mean, the fact that a bank can require many steps to move money, or can retract a transaction, is a feature, not a bug. Most people do not understand how to handle their finances and don't understand the technical aspects for moving large amounts of money or for making complex decisions. That, to be said, doesn't mean that we can't. We can learn, and learning is a process. But I think it's really important for people to keep in mind that just because you have the technical competence to do something doesn't mean everyone has that technical competence. And key management is like the first step in like entering this space of like, okay, we need to tackle, this is our first thing we need to learn how to do. And it's very risky for a lot of people who are not used to managing their own assets. But once you get that, then there's the next step and the next one. And soon we can like, there's all different kinds of things that you can do that previously you were not able to do.
Yeah, I mean, putting myself back in the shoes of someone who had no idea what cryptocurrency was, and like figuring out, okay, what the heck are these long lists of numbers? I have to write them down exactly right. What happens if I lose them? Why do, and it's, I mean, there is something to be said about the reality of that moment is very important, and that responsibility is yours. That's probably something that, yes, ease of use and convenience is, of course, what everyone's going to prefer. But I mean, it's character building, I think, to have that responsibility on your shoulders for, you know, for a transaction.
And I think it's very important to be humble and to know what you're good at and what you're not. And you need to assess your skill and only level up when your skill matches that. You know, don't make financial decisions that you don't understand. That's, I think, really important.
Yeah, for sure. Great. These are great questions. This is like the best time I'm having yet. Let's see. Do you think that the distribution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies per se is flawed? I'm not sure. Who asked this one? Compound Matrix. What do you think? I'm curious what he's more specifically, the distribution, what it based on the wallets, like who owns how much Bitcoin?
I think
what do you think?
A widely understood fact that much of the Bitcoin is owned by small groups of people. And if your goal is to have a global economy based on assets that are not related to gatekeepers, then that is a flaw. But I think that's inevitable at the early stages of some technologies, and that the direction that it's going is towards greater diversity and distribution. I'm not saying that it's ever going to get there. This is an open question. Bitcoin is an experiment. Can we as human beings cooperate on this level? And I'm very excited and very inspired by the slow but steady direction I see towards that. And if anyone has there's some people that say, okay, there's not enough Bitcoin in the third world or the developing world, and there's not enough Bitcoin being held by women. And there's this wonderful send button. You're welcome to send your Bitcoin to people anywhere you want if you want to help that wealth distribution factor.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people who I've spoken to who are in Bitcoin very early, and that's what they would do. They would just meet people, be like, hey, here's the Bitcoin address. Here's a little bit of Bitcoin. Play with it, because, again, it wasn't worth very much back then. But they could send a little bit, and in that way they were, spreading their wealth and also spreading the knowledge and hopefully inspiring other people to do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. what, maybe this isn't your best question. What is your preferred key storage method?
I have not found it yet. Please send me tips.
If you find a great one, you better talk about it, because I'm sure other people who have fumbled with that might be able to learn also. Okay, what do you think about Bitcoin in emerging markets and the fact that this technology is predominantly accessible to the people who don't have an acute need for it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the fundamental conundrums of this technology, right? You need to have a certain amount of wealth in order to not touch your wealth for a few days. You need to have a certain amount of wealth in order to not have a transaction fee make it irrelevant for you. That being said, even in some very low income communities, I've seen some use cases where it did make sense to use Bitcoin. I think that when it comes to emerging markets overall, we're at the very beginning. I mean, like chapter 1, sentence 1. And I'm very inspired by the creativity, the innovativeness that I've seen from these users who have less to play with and higher stakes because they have less financial security. I think that those users are some of the most devoted and creative and just inspiring. Like, there's just so much potential there. Yes, we're at the very beginning. Yes, we're not where we need to be. And we'll see if we're able to get to the true potential of where that could offer them.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some traveling through Africa as well, and I was speaking to some people who were very interested in learning about, talk about people who distrust their government. Like, they were all about any way of keeping their money their own. And they had smartphones, but that's a great point that you brought up too, is like the luxury of being able to save money is something that is going to be a hump. But micropayments and decreased transaction fees, I think will definitely alleviate that.
Hold on, I want to make a really quick comment on that, because what you said is really important. You talked about Africa. So there's a lot of different regions of the world, and Africa is a giant, giant, giant continent. So I'm not trying to say one thing to fit them all. However, we're talking about growth. We're talking about new users that are onboarding to peer-to-peer exchanges. We're talking about new wallets being opened. I mean, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, these are the countries that it's happening at crazy awesome numbers. And maybe when we think about it from an American perspective, we're like, oh, that's only 400,000, or oh, that's only 20,000. But when you think about the people who have access to the electricity and the financial market they would need to first get that, that's a really considerable percentage, an inspiring percentage, because it can trickle out from there in terms of education and awareness. So I actually think that Africa is one of the most interesting regions to watch when it comes to cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. And they're like the most industrious, creative people, like hardworking people generally. I'm speaking specifically like what I saw in like Zimbabwe and like Zambia, like on the East Coast. Oh my gosh, those people are, they could do some great things if they had the right tools. And I this past year I spent some time in South Africa, and it was like a nicer neighborhood. Obviously, it wasn't like the slums or anything, but I was staying in an Airbnb, and she asked me, what I did. And I kind of start off saying I'm a travel blogger, and then I kind of go into Bitcoin a little bit. And I said Bitcoin, and her eyes lit up. She posted it on her Facebook group, and like over the next 3 days, we had like 20 people show up at her house, and I just talked to them about Bitcoin, and like I learned about the exchanges there and everything. And it was like, wow, this is so cool seeing people like so open, like a sponge to learn about anything to escape like their hyperinflating currency.
Yeah. And when you see the impact it has for people, I mean, like, that's the story that I hope gets out there more than market up, market down. Markets are great, and I love market coverage, but that's not the only story of Bitcoin. And I really hope that those personal stories of passion and creation get out more.
Yeah. So I did see, a comment asking about decentralized exchanges, if you think that they are truly decentralized. And
Here's an answer. There's no such thing as a decentralized exchange right now. There are very interesting projects that decentralize specific aspects of an exchange. And I am very curious to see what happens to them over the next few years.
Yeah. That's maybe, that could be like a kind of add-on for this proof of keys, is take them off the centralized exchange and just see what happens. See if you can use a decentralized exchange and what you think about that.
If you know, key management, and then it's a lot of things to learn.
I'll make some how-to videos for you.
Yes, please.
Let's see. Okay, I think our Nicole Vela, thank you for being strong women voices in crypto. Grateful for channels like this and crypto women like you too. Oh, that's so sweet. Hey, Nicole, what's up? Thank you for that comment. Okay, another question. This is sweet. I have like, my work is so easy tonight. You've covered many stories about vulnerable communities. How concerned are you about the state of Bitcoin privacy in that regard?
Yeah, that's something that is talked about a lot with a lot of my sources. I mean, I personally understand it less than them. So I'm not crazy concerned, but I do understand that in very specific use cases that they have, that it's important. Especially when we're talking about exchanges, for example, centralized institutions that are regulated and as such need to exclude certain populations or in order to work with a bank or in order to work with a credit card processor. I think that things like CoinJoin and other tools that allow us to make it harder to track specific transactions are very beneficial to them. But I understand also some of the concerns about complete anonymity on the blockchain. I have no genius answer in terms of like, this is a solution or that is a solution. I just have the general understanding that this is a concern and that we should continue to explore fungibility when it comes to Bitcoin, trying to do that without sacrificing the transparency of the data.
Yeah. Also, how do you feel about KYC / AML practices?
I mean, I feel the same way I feel about all paperwork. I'm not a fan of paperwork. It doesn't mean I don't think it's useful. It doesn't mean that I don't understand why it is I have to do it. I wouldn't say I enjoy it or that I particularly advocate for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really on the fence. Well, not really so much on the fence about it, but I have my views about KYC and like the real motivations for it. And
motivations for KYC.
Well, they want to say it's like against, you know, terrorism and money laundering and things, but I think they want to know who's into crypto, and I think that they I don't know, they want to get as much of your data as possible. So
I mean, that's a fact. And can I just throw out something that like I spent, so the early parts of my career, obviously I was focusing a lot in the Middle East. I spent years studying terrorism, working with sources that either were themselves involved in terrorist activities or were the victims of terrorist activities. I have no concerns about Bitcoin being the primary tool, or any cryptocurrency for that matter, being a primary tool for terrorist activities. It is much less useful than the dollar. And that does not mean that there is not some terrorists out there who might be using Bitcoin. I believe ISIS raised like $200 worth of Bitcoin a few years ago. But in terms of like compared to other financial tools and assets that are accessible, it is just so low on the totem pole. I don't want to hear anyone saying that they're against crypto because they're against terrorism. It's just not the primary tool or even a popular tool amongst people who want to commit those kinds of acts.
Yeah. I mean, unless terrorism suddenly existed when Bitcoin was created, then there might be a little bit more of an argument there, but that argument is just kind of unfavorable. So I have a follow-up question. Is the reason transparency is important, in your opinion, the verifiable monetary properties of Bitcoin, or for keeping power accountable?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a good
one. So why do you think transparency is important?
I think if we remove execution from the process, then we need to have an ability to hold people accountable. And transparency is our tool for that. I am not going to make any arguments about the degrees of transparency, about the best ways to implement that. I'm not an experienced cryptographer and technologist that would have like precise definitions and solutions that I think are superior to other solutions. I'm just saying that like as an overall concept, the reason that transparency is important for Bitcoin is because when you become your own bank, you also need to be able to make educated decisions about who you're transacting with for yourself. And so that's what transparency offers you. That's its important function for the user.
Yeah, there are some projects that are trying to help with that, like Civic comes to mind, but like kind of encrypting data for verifying your identity and credibility. So, I mean, that's something that I think would be really interesting to be developed in the future.
And also just if the payment went through, right? Like if you're not going to call your bank and say like, oh, hey, did that transfer go through? You need to be able to see yourself like, oh yeah, okay, that went through. Got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So someone wants to ask about our significant others. Do you talk Bitcoin with them all of the time? I don't know if
it is definitely an issue.
Really? Oh no.
Yeah, no, I definitely talk about Bitcoin with, not intentionally. It's what I am doing. You know, if somebody comes over and like, Leigh, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out this hardware wallet because I want to move my stuff. Or if somebody's like, how was work today, Leigh? And I'm like, I got to hang out with a really cool developer and I got to learn about the way that Snarks work, or like whatever it is. It's a part of my life. I definitely have not yet dated anyone who was really into Bitcoin. I've mostly, my partner was mostly not a fan of Bitcoin, but it offers an opportunity for me to hear really outsider criticism.
That's true. Yeah.
I think it's just really funny. Like it's just it's a funny topic that I try to avoid with people who are not in this space, because I have very little desire to try and argue with someone who doesn't want to learn more.
Yeah. Well, at least one day when they come around, you can have the satisfaction of knowing that you planted the seeds.
Oh, yeah, that's also a really good look at it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Those are, I mean, unless anyone has a question, again, in the chat, I think we can kind of wrap it up. I know you have a busy day today, so I'm going to respect your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Hopefully, maybe we can do this again in the future. I can have you on, my channel, Crypto Tips, also. Yeah, I think this is super. So is there anything that you want to share with our guests tonight, where they can find more about you, what you're interested in talking about? Here's your time to spill.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we were just talking about me talking to people who are not a fan of Bitcoin. And I think that this is my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of my employer or anyone else. I'm a really big believer in not trying to convert people. I'm a really big believer in looking at, for your life and also for the life of your loved ones, the people you interact with, whether Bitcoin is useful for them. And for me personally, it's very useful. And I think that it's really important just for like people in general in the space to keep coming back to the grounded reality of like, what value does this asset bring me? And how much do I understand about how it works? And to always be making sure that you're making choices that are in line with your own skill level and your understanding. There's no rush. Bitcoin is going to still be here. So, you know, there's no FOMO. There's no, okay, you got to buy because the price is cheap and you have to sell because the price is high. Like, make financial choices that are good for you. And I'm just going to, I guess, leave us with a little bit of, for me in my life, how I found it useful. When I was during an Israeli military operation in Gaza where many people died, somebody said something that really stuck with me. And it was telling me that foreign journalists make a lot of money off of our deaths. And it really was something I was concerned about for a long time in terms of, for the media industry, the way that we have people that have difficulty receiving transactions or moving across borders. They are excluded from the creation process. And for me, I see Bitcoin as a way for me to challenge that exploitive power structure. And I can hire or work with, you know, photographers or translators or editors on the ground that are from the communities that I might be reporting on, and I can pay them regardless of whether or not the infrastructure is there and I can't get a payment to them for 6 months. And I used to work abroad a lot, and it was really a problem being able to pay locals on the ground in order to cooperate with them and co-create with them rather than having them be a subject of the foreign gaze. And Bitcoin, from my personal life and my career, offers a lot of value for that. I remember waiting 6 months to be able to get money to my photographer and translator. And with Bitcoin, I've been able to do it instantly. So I'm not saying I do it a lot. I'm not saying that it's a perfect system, but I'm saying that for me in my career and my life, I found real tangible value for Bitcoin. And I would love to, as I continue to work in my career, to do that more often. And I would love for other people as well to think about in your life, how does this asset create new value and offer me an opportunity to subvert power structures that I found problematic to begin with? Is there something power that I could take in my own hands to challenge that now that I have this new tool? And for me, that's what Bitcoin represents. And I'm really excited about that.
That's beautiful. That's really awesome. So where can people find you on Twitter, or like, are you active on Twitter?
Yeah.
How can people interact with you?
Yeah, Twitter's my jam. So it's LA__CUEN, Leigh Cuen. That's me on Twitter. You'll probably always find my work on CoinDesk, coindesk.com, pretty easy. And yeah, I'm pretty engaged on Twitter. I'm pretty responsive, so feel free to tweet questions at me. And if I have time and they're nice and polite, like, I'll definitely love to engage with my readers. Thank you so much for having me today.
Very cool. Yeah, I totally enjoyed this also. So thank you everyone who took part in the live chat. Really appreciate your questions. I think this was a very insightful talk that we had with Leigh. So thank you for joining the CryptoCast Network on Crypto Q&A Live. See you next week, Thursday, same time. See you there. Bye, guys.